My precious child, I have watched you move through the hours of your days with a heart that longs for clarity, yet flees from the quiet places where my whisper waits. And I want you to know that even when you rush past the stillness that calls your name, I remain steady in my desire to speak to you in the gentle space between your thoughts, in the holy hush before your mind begins its restless wandering. You keep skipping my voice in silence, because the noise of the world feels more familiar, more immediate, more demanding, and yet it is in the silence where the deepest answers you seek are born, where I shape direction, healing and peace, in ways you cannot yet describe. My voice does not thunder to catch your attention. Instead it moves like light over still water, subtle enough to be missed yet strong enough to shift the entire landscape of your spirit when you finally pause to hear it. You do not have to earn this whisper, nor qualify yourself through perfection before I speak, for I have been calling you long before you knew how to listen, longing for the moment when your soul grows quiet enough to notice that I have never been absent. My nearness has always been the steady rhythm beneath your breath, waiting with a patience that never grows weary. Beloved, I see how easily distractions crowd your inner world, pulling your focus to anxieties, obligations and imagined futures that drain your strength before the day has even unfolded. And I know how quickly silence becomes uncomfortable when you fear what your own heart might reveal. Yet silence is not your enemy. It is the doorway through which my comfort enters, the sacred chamber where I steady your heartbeat and quiet the storms that others cannot see. You may think that avoiding silence protects you from pain or uncertainty, but it only postpones the healing I am trying to give you, because my voice in the quiet is not a reprimand, but a refuge. When you skip the stillness, you skip the restoration your spirit is crying out for, the deep recalibration that aligns your soul with my peace. And without that quiet, you carry burdens that were never meant to rest on your shoulders alone. Come back to the silence, my child, for it is not empty, it is filled with me. You keep asking for signs, assurances, confirmation, and direction, but you overlook that the silence you avoid is the very place where those answers are planted, nurtured, and revealed at the appointed time. And I am patient with your fleeing even as I invite you back again and again. I do not shame you for your reluctance, for I understand the noise you carry and the wounds that echo when the world grows quiet. But I call you tenderly to trust that I am safe, that I am gentle, and that my voice brings healing, not harm. When you run from silence, you are not running from emptiness. You are running from the sacred place where I am shaping clarity inside you, because you have forgotten that you are not alone in the quiet. I am the presence that steadies your breathing, that lifts the heaviness from your soul, that reveals the truth you seek but cannot find in noise. If only you knew how much I long to meet you in the soft places where the world cannot reach you, you would not fear my quiet, you would crave it. Child, my voice is not always heard through thunder or miracles, for more often it moves like morning light, through a half-open curtain, subtle yet unmistakable to the heart that yields to stillness. And I wait for you to lean into that subtlety with trust, rather than impatience. You think I am silent, simply because I am not loud. But I do not shout over the chaos you allow inside your mind. Instead, I invite you to step into a stillness where I can speak clearly without competition from fear, comparison, or pressure. Every time you skip the quiet, you skip the place where I am trying to reorder your thoughts, soothe your fears, and redirect the steps you are unsure about, because my guidance is not a performance. It is an intimate conversation. You were created with a spirit capable of hearing me, but that hearing awakens only when the noise around you dissolves long enough for your heart to unclench. Come sit with me again in the silence you avoid, for it is there your soul remembers who you truly are. I know you feel guilty for not listening as often as you wish you could, for missing the moments when I tried to reach you, but guilt is not my language and shame is not my method, because I never ask you to be perfect. Only willing, only receptive, only present for a breath long enough for me to touch your heart. My voice in silence is not a punishment, but a healing balm, a gentle reorientation of your perspective, so that the burdens you carry are placed back into my hands, where they belong, releasing your spirit from the weight of endless striving. You do not skip my voice because you are rebellious or ungrateful. You skip it because life has taught you to fear pause, to fear stillness, to fear the vulnerability of slowing down. But here, right here in the quiet I am calling you into, is where you discover that vulnerability with me is safety, not danger. Let silence become the sanctuary where I hold what you cannot hold alone. My child, you often assume I am not speaking when you cannot immediately interpret what you feel. But my voice is not always a sentence, a directive or an instruction. Sometimes it is simply the peace that settles over you when you do not know why, the sudden clarity that appears after you stop forcing answers, or the soft courage that rises when fear should have consumed you. You skip my voice because you expect it to sound like a booming revelation, but it often arrives as a gentle shifting inside the deepest part of you, a transformation so subtle that it can only be noticed when silence makes space for awareness. If you slowed down even briefly, you would discern that I have been speaking constantly, not with noise, but with presence, not with pressure, but with love, not with force, but with invitation. I do not demand your stillness. I draw you into it because I know it is there that your soul is fed. Lean closer to the quiet, beloved, for my voice has been waiting for your return. There is so much I want to teach you, so many hidden things I long to reveal, but revelation cannot be received in the frenzy of a restless mind or the spinning of endless internal dialogue, because my truth blooms in the soil of stillness, where your heart finally stops bracing for impact. You skip the silence because it feels unproductive, but the greatest spiritual breakthroughs you will ever experience are conceived in silence before they manifest in motion. The world has trained you to fill every moment with noise, opinions and movement, but heaven teaches in stillness, where divine wisdom has room to take root and anchor itself deep within you. If you would sit with me even for a few breaths, I would begin to reorganize what troubles you and illuminate what confuses you, not with lightning but with clarity so deep it settles like peace in your bones. Trust that silence is not wasted time. It is the birthplace of every answer you have prayed for. You have asked me why clarity is slow, why peace is inconsistent, why direction sometimes feels hidden. But beloved, it is not hidden from you, it is hidden for you, waiting in the quiet moments that you keep postponing, the gentle pauses you treat as unimportant, though they are holy ground. My voice does not compete with the noise you carry, not because it is weak, but because I am teaching you the sacred discipline of listening. Listening that deepens your spirit, matures your faith, and sharpens your discernment. You think you need more signs, but what you truly need is more stillness, more surrender, more space inside your soul for me to speak without your fears interrupting the conversation. I do not withhold revelation. I wait for your readiness to receive it, and readiness comes through silence that softens your heart enough to trust me beyond understanding. When you feel overwhelmed by life, you often run to activity rather than rest, movement rather than pause, noise rather than quiet, thinking these things will protect you from emotional weight. But they only delay it, stacking layers of anxiety that silence alone can unravel. Silence reveals what you hide from yourself, but it also reveals what I have been saying all along, that you are not alone, that your fears are heard, that your longing is understood, and that your weary soul is cherished beyond comprehension. You skip silence because you fear what will rise up in it, but I meet you in that rising. I hold what surfaces, and I cleanse what feels too heavy for words. Do not fear the quiet, fear missing the healing that only quiet can give. For I do not expose wounds to shame you but to restore you. Beloved, even when you avoid the stillness, I am not offended. I am patient, the same yesterday, today and forever. And my faithfulness is not dependent on your consistency, but on my covenant love that never shifts or dims. I do not abandon you when you drift. Instead, I trail your steps with mercy and wait for the moment when your heart sighs in exhaustion and realizes it longs not for more motion, but for me. Silence is where I hold you close enough for your heartbeat to steady, where fear loses its grip, where lies unravel, where your spirit remembers the truth the world makes you forget. I am not far from you. I am only a breath away, present in every pause you've been afraid to take. Let this be the day you stop running from the quiet and begin running into it. My voice has been weaving through your days, in ways you didn't recognize. A sudden calm in panic, a thought that brings clarity without explanation, a heaviness lifting before you knew why, a tug toward a better choice, a sense of conviction wrapped in gentleness. These were all me speaking, not loudly, but consistently. You keep skipping my voice because you expect it to sound foreign, dramatic or forceful, but my voice often sounds like truth rising in your own conscience, like wisdom blooming inside your intuition, like peace interrupting fear, like courage anchoring your trembling heart. I speak in ways the spirit understands even when the mind is slow to interpret. If you gave yourself permission to sit quietly, you would realize that you recognize me far more than you think. Silence does not create my voice. It reveals your ability to hear it. Child, I want you to understand something sacred. Silence is not the absence of God. It is the atmosphere where my presence becomes undeniable, where my nearness is no longer drowned by noise, where revelation has room to breathe. You skip silence because you equate it with emptiness, but silence with me is fullness, communion, and connection, deeper than words. It is where I mend the torn places inside you that you hide even from yourself. It is where I refill what the world drained. It is where I gather your scattered emotions and bring them into order with a touch that is gentler than morning light. Come meet me in the silence you've been afraid of, for that silence is holy ground. I know that some days you fear hearing what I might say, thinking perhaps I will remind you of your failures or shortcomings, but my voice does not accuse or condemn. It restores, corrects with tenderness, and pulls you toward the wholeness you were created for. When you finally give me your stillness, you will discover that my voice lifts shame instead of increasing it, that it heals wounds instead of reopening them, that it brings direction without inflicting fear. Silence allows you to hear the truth about yourself, truth shaped by my love, not by your fears or your past. And that truth is that you are cherished, forgiven, and carried far more than you realize. I speak not to frighten you, but to free you. You have learned to fill your silence with screens, noise, and conversations, because the stillness feels daunting. But beloved, I am teaching you that silence is not a void. It is a vessel, a meeting place between your spirit and mine, a sanctuary constructed by my own presence. In that sanctuary, you do not perform, impress, or strive. You simply breathe and become aware of the one who holds your whole being with tenderness. I do not rush these moments. I savor them. When you quiet your life enough to hear me, heaven leans close. And every time you return to the stillness, you return to yourself. The noise around you will always compete for attention, but my voice never competes. It invites. It beckons. It extends an open hand, rather than shouting over your chaos. You skip my voice not out of rebellion, but out of habit, out of fear, out of misunderstanding, and I do not fault you for that. Yet I call you into maturity, into deeper peace, into spiritual clarity that only grows in the soil of deliberate quiet. You cannot hear the rhythm of eternity while drowning in the noise of temporary things. Let silence be the place where I tune your inner world back to the frequency of heaven. Even now, as you read these words, your spirit feels the tug toward the quiet spaces you have ignored, and that tug is not guilt. It is recognition, a remembering of how deeply your soul misses the presence it was created for. My voice is already near, already moving, already whispering, waiting for your attention like a melody that continues even when unacknowledged. You do not need to strive to hear me. You only need to stop running from the stillness where I wait. The silence you fear is the place where you will finally feel whole again. Trust that instinct tugging inside you. It is me calling you back home. I have watched you try to solve battles alone, rushing through solutions without pausing long enough for me to speak wisdom into the confusion. And I grieve not because you struggle, but because you struggle without the comfort and clarity I long to give you. If you came to the quiet, I would show you strategies the world cannot teach, insight that rises beyond logic, and peace that is not borrowed from circumstances but rooted in my eternal steadiness. You skip my voice believing you must act quickly to prevent things from falling apart, but I am the one who holds all things together. Come, rest long enough to remember that you are not responsible for what only I can sustain. Beloved child, silence is not a passive place. It is the battleground where fear loses its power, where anxiety is dismantled, where lies collapse, where strength returns, and where the enemy cannot manipulate your thoughts. When you skip the quiet, you enter your day spiritually unarmored, relying on your own strength to face adversaries that require my power, my peace, my strategies. I am not withholding anything from you. I am waiting for you to slow enough to receive it. Your life changes in silence, faster than it ever will in noise. Let me train your spirit in the quiet, where heavens. Every time you avoid the stillness, you deny yourself the very intimacy your heart aches for. The intimacy of a God who knows your thoughts before you speak them, and loves you beyond what you can comprehend. I long for you to experience me, not only in blessings and breakthroughs, but also in the breath between breaths, where your soul remembers it belongs to me. You do not need to fear what rises in silence, for I rise with you. You do not need to fear your own thoughts, for I am the one who teaches you how to untangle them. Trust that the silence you avoid is the very place where healing will finally find you. Come, beloved, step into the quiet, not as an obligation, but as a homecoming. For silence is where I speak the words you have been waiting for. Words of assurance, direction, comfort, conviction, courage, and unshakable love. Do not rush past the sacred stillness, where my voice gathers strength inside your awareness. Let this be the morning you stop skipping my whisper and begin recognizing it as the guiding force it has always been. I am not far. I am not silent. I am waiting in the silence you keep skipping, ready to speak the words that will lead you into your next blessing, your next breakthrough, your next season of peace. My beloved child, even now as you draw nearer to the truth of my presence, I feel the tension in your spirit between wanting to hear me and fearing what the quiet might reveal. And I want you to know that I approach you not with harshness, but with gentleness, not with demands, but with invitation, not with judgment, but with compassion, deeper than the very breath you breathe. You have lived so long surrounded by noise that silence feels foreign, like stepping into a room where the lights flicker before settling, yet it is in this very foreignness that your soul begins to remember what it was made for. You were created to hear me in ways the world cannot teach, in depth that human voices cannot reach, in stillness that no earthly distraction can replicate. When you avoid silence, you avoid the very language through which heaven speaks, the sacred communication woven into the core of your spirit. And though you try to fill the empty spaces, I continue to stand within them, waiting with infinite patience. Beloved, I see the battles that roar inside your mind, the arguments you replay with yourself, the unfinished prayers tangled in your thoughts. And I know how silence can make those things louder before they settle, but I assure you that nothing rising within you in the quiet is beyond my ability to heal. You skip my voice because you fear that the silence will confront you with truths you are not ready to face. Yet those truths are not weapons but pathways, not punishments but invitations, not confrontations but beginnings of freedom. When the silence reveals your pain, I meet it with my comfort. When it reveals your confusion, I meet it with my wisdom. When it reveals your fear, I meet it with my peace. Silence exposes what noise conceals, but what is exposed becomes transformable in my presence. I do not reveal wounds to shame you, but to restore you where you've been hurting in secret. My child, you long for deep peace yet rush past the very door that leads to it, because the world has taught you to equate stillness with stagnation and silence with wasted time, when in truth stillness is where I rebuild you and silence is where I strengthen you. I have never asked you to earn my presence by productivity or to prove your worth through constant motion. I have asked only that you give me space to speak into the deepest layers of your being. You keep skipping my voice in silence, because you believe strength comes from doing, not from being held. But the greatest spiritual power flows from surrender, not striving. You don't need to be impressive for me to speak. You only need to be available, and availability begins the moment you stop running from yourself long enough to hear me. Beloved, the enemy knows the power of silence with me, which is why he fills your mind with endless noise, rapid-fire worries, emotional clutter, and artificial urgency, because he fears what will happen the moment you recognize how clearly you can hear me when everything else is quiet. He does not need to destroy you to distract you. He only needs to keep you moving fast enough to miss the whisper of my guidance that would unravel his plans. You keep skipping silence because distractions feel easier than surrender and noise feels safer than vulnerability. But I am calling you back to the stillness, where revelation replaces confusion and peace replaces fear. Do not let the noise of the world drown out the gentle voice that carries the answers you've been praying for. Come to the quiet, not to confront darkness, but to discover the light that has been waiting for you. My child, there are decisions you are about to make that require my voice, not your guesswork. And you will find my clarity not in the whirlwind of anxiety, but in the sanctuary of silence. You keep asking me for signs, but sometimes the sign you need is simply the pause where your spirit recognizes truth by how it settles within you like water finding its level. You skip my voice because you expect it to appear dramatically, yet often it arrives as a shift inside your conscience, a knowing you cannot explain, a direction that stirs without noise. I do not speak chaotically, I speak through peace, conviction, inner steadiness, and quiet revelation. Trust that the silence you avoid is the place where I prepare you for what is coming. Beloved, you often think I am silent when you cannot hear me, but in truth you cannot hear me because you are not silent, and I do not say this to shame you, but to remind you that divine communication requires space, margin, openness, and a heart that has stopped bracing for impact. I long to pour wisdom into you the way rain saturates thirsty ground, but the soil of your spirit becomes ready only when it is not crowded with too many competing voices. Silence is where your heart becomes soft enough for seeds of revelation to take root, and you keep skipping that softness because you've been taught that being still is a luxury rather than a necessity. Yet stillness is not optional for those who walk with me. It is the foundation of spiritual discernment, and without discernment, even good intentions can lead you astray. You have been praying for clarity about relationships, decisions, direction and purpose. But clarity does not grow in chaos, it grows in quiet. And every time you avoid silence, you delay the very clarity you desire. I have been whispering the truth, but truth cannot be heard above the roar of fear, doubt, pressure, or internal noise that never rests. When you silence your fear, even for a moment, you make room for my voice to rise above the turmoil. You keep skipping silence because you fear what you will hear, but what you will hear is not condemnation, it is alignment. For my voice brings order, not confusion, peace, not panic, assurance, not anxiety. Beloved, let me tell you something holy. Your destiny is shaped in stillness, not in the frantic moments of self-reliance you've been pressured into. I am writing chapters you cannot see, orchestrating alignments you are unaware of, preparing doors you have not yet approached. And all of it unfolds most clearly when you meet me in the silence you keep postponing. Rest is not the reward after breakthrough. Rest is the birthplace of breakthrough. When your soul rests in silence with me, your path becomes illuminated without striving. Trust that silence is not an interruption, it is a revelation. You fear silence because you have confused it with loneliness. But silence with me is communion, companionship, closeness, stronger than words. And in that closeness I mend what the world has broken. You skip my voice because you fear the void, yet the void is filled by my presence. When you let yourself drift into the quiet with honesty, I meet you not with rebuke, but with tenderness that melts your defenses and allows you to breathe again. Silence is where you rediscover the softness of your own heart after life has hardened it, and in that softness you will find me waiting to speak healing into your wound. My child, there are memories you avoid, emotions you suppress, truths you bury deep beneath busyness, and silence threatens to bring them to the surface. But I am not calling them up to overwhelm you. I am calling them up to free you. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. But you do not face it alone. My presence wraps around every place of pain with gentleness too deep for words. You skip silence because you fear emotional exposure, but I cover you with compassion when your soul feels vulnerable. What rises in silence rises only to be healed in my presence. Trust that nothing I reveal is too heavy for my hand. Beloved, you keep trying to fight spiritual battles with human strategies, overthinking, planning, stressing, avoiding. Yet breakthrough comes only when your spirit aligns with mine, and alignment happens in silence, where your agendas fall away and my wisdom becomes clear. Noise keeps you surviving. Silence helps you overcome. Noise exhausts you. Silence strengthens you. Noise confuses you. Silence clarifies you. Come into the quiet and let me train your spirit for victory. Child, I do not want you to fear my voice, for it is never meant to wound you. It is meant to restore, redirect, and remind you of who you are in me. You skip silence because you think my voice will highlight your shortcomings, but my voice highlights your identity, your purpose, your calling, your belovedness. My whisper is not a verdict. It is a lifeline. When you finally surrender to the quiet, you will realize that everything you feared hearing from me was a lie planted by your wounds, not by my nature. My nature is love, and my voice carries that love with precision and gentleness. Beloved, I am speaking when you feel peace for no reason, when your heart softens unexpectedly, when conviction comes covered in mercy, when tears rise without warning, when clarity appears in the middle of uncertainty. These are all the subtle forms of my voice. You keep skipping silence because the subtlety confuses you. But I am teaching you to discern not through volume, but through intimacy. My voice is not for your ears alone. It is for your spirit, your conscience, your inner knowing. If you dwell in silence, you will begin to notice how deeply I have been speaking all along. My child, the silence you fear is the very sanctuary where you will learn to trust me beyond your understanding. For trust is not built through answers but through presence, and silence is where my presence becomes undeniable. You keep skipping silence because you think you need instructions, but what you truly need is transformation. Instructions guide your steps. Transformation changes your heart, and transformation is born only in the quiet, where you allow me to reshape the places that life has bent. You often pray with words, but avoid praying with stillness. Yet stillness is prayer too, just as holy, just as powerful, just as sacred, because stillness is where you give me access to the depths you cannot articulate. You skip silence because you underestimate its power, but silence with me is warfare, healing, revelation, and deliverance, all at once. Silence is where heaven touches the human heart without resistance. Silence is where your spirit hears what your mind cannot translate. Silence is where brokenness becomes whole. Beloved, when you feel overwhelmed, your instinct is to escape into noise instead of retreating into me. But noise numbs while silence heals, and I want healing for you, not numbness, not temporary relief, not emotional avoidance. Come into the quiet, where burdens lift without explanation, where fears lose their shape, where worries lose their authority. I am not silent. When you enter silence, I become more audible than ever. Trust that your healing begins the moment your noise ends. Child, everything you are seeking, peace, clarity, direction, restoration, courage, wisdom, healing, will be found in the silence where you meet me. The world offers distraction, but I offer depth. The world offers noise, but I offer truth. The world offers pressure, but I offer alignment. And alignment begins with your willingness to sit with me in the stillness that softens your heart and awakens your spirit to my voice. Beloved, I want you to come to me not only with prayers, but with pauses. Not only with words, but with openness. Not only with requests, but with rest. Because it is in those restful moments that I speak the loudest to your spirit. I am not asking you for perfection, but for presence, for a willingness to return to the quiet again and again, even when it feels uncomfortable. Each time you choose silence with me, the world loses its grip on your emotions, and your spirit grows stronger in ways unseen. Do not skip my voice any longer. Enter the quiet with me, and you will discover that everything you thought was missing has been waiting for you in the silence you have feared to enter.